Power on.
Real-time Sovryn is go.
Woo, the man of tomorrow is here for another real-time Sovryn, and I want to talk about what's happening in the gaming industry right now. Because the reality is, in the tech world in general, we're at a real inflection point, almost a reckoning, okay? Now, on Sovryn Tech over the years, I've talked about, of course, how overall the tech world is narrowly avoiding a bubble that should have burst 10, 12 years ago. Basically, you had not the smartphone didn't save it. Basically, you had a couple of things over the years save it, and right now it's something else. But you had blockchain technology, which saved it temporarily, right? Funding basically with corporate script, altcoins. And then in recent years, we've had the onslaught of narrow AI technologies. And I was very particular in my terms, narrow AI technologies, okay, that are seem like for at least a couple of years were able to save the day, but at the same time, the bills are starting to need to get paid by those in Silicon Valley. Anyway, I don't want to get too lost on that, but another industry, an adjacent industry to, the tech world overall, and really it's part of the tech world, is the gaming industry. Now, I've said over the many years that, if you were to describe me, I'm a gamer first, a historian second, and a tech journalist third. Okay. So you can see how seriously I take gaming when I say that, and again, it's kind of funny because a lot of people who seem to, meet me or hang out with me or talk to me or whatever, I don't think they believe it, but if they spent, time in my home, right, or time with me, they'd realize just how much, it is a part of my life in varying ways. Okay. Why am I that? Partly it just comes down to growing up, at the start of the video game craze. Okay. And as I've always said, video games are single-handedly, they are the greatest art form humanity has ever devised. In fact, I could go so far as to say, while we're talking about the larger tech world, I could go so far as to say that really with computers, anything you think a computer does or that the interconnected computerized world does, we can actually do 99.99999% of those things without a computer. Whatever it is that you think of. Okay. The things that need a computer, yes, people love to bring up spreadsheets, and that's actually one of the major drivers of computer technology. But really, the two major drivers of computer technology overall are spreadsheets and video games. Okay. And, people might want to toss porn in there, but we don't need computers for porn, right? But really, even spreadsheets is a little bit dubious, but ultimately, because, you kind of could do them by hand, at least the style of them, right? That you might not be able to put in the equations and they automatically work out and whatever, okay. But you get my point. Okay. But the one thing you can't do, you have to have a computer for, is play video games. And so in one sense, the only thing a computer is actually good for is playing video games. In fact, I've famously said over the years that, or maybe infamously, said that, computers aren't actually computers. They're just TIE fighter boxes, meaning that they're just boxes designed to play Star Wars TIE Fighter. That was peak performance. That was the pinnacle of art. That was the pinnacle of what computers are meant to do. It all went downhill from there. And if you think about it long enough, you'll realize I'm right. Regardless, the train of technological advancement, of computer power, increasing has gone on. And here we are towards the end of 2024. And like I said, we're at a real inflection point. We're here. We're at a crux, or not a crux, a crossroads. Okay. And there has been a dramatic shift overall in the gaming world. Without, again, I don't need to get into AI and whatever. Is that going to be relevant to video games? Yes. And I do think it's going to be to its detriment. Just to give you the shorthand on that, when I think about one of the greatest games, and if somebody wanted to call it the greatest game ever, Famitsu almost gave it that. It's one of their perfect 40s. But one of the greatest games ever made, again, or if the greatest, I wouldn't argue much, is the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, right? Skyrim, just far and away, one of the greatest games ever made. All of the mythology and all that, and Mrs. Sovryn plays the shit out of Skyrim. Okay. And so I get to, by proxy, learn everything about Skyrim. Not that I'm unfamiliar with Elder Scrolls. I mean, I've been playing Elder Scrolls games. Maybe I played the first one for 5 minutes, but basically 2, and especially, Morrowind, and then Oblivion. Oblivion, you had fucking Patrick Stewart, and I was playing it nonstop. Okay. Anyway, didn't play Skyrim as much, but have in recent years. And of course, like I said, by proxy, I get to learn all this, through my, just remarkable wife. And everything in that, all the mythology, all this, that's all written by humans. And it's such an incredible mythology. Actually, Mrs. Sovryn was saying to me the other day, she's like, this must be what it's like, because she's so into that game. She's like, this must be what it's like for you with Star Trek or Star Wars. And of course I immediately said, well, you mean pre-Disney Star Wars, right? She's like, yeah. I know. Like, okay. But yes, this is what it's like, meaning that I am so enamored by the quality, of the universe creation, the world creation, or the world building as it gets called today, for franchises like Star Trek. And of course, when we're talking Star Trek, we're talking pre-2017 Star Trek. Everything after that is shit. All that, I'm so into that. I'm so in tune with that. I have so many books that cover that, and I still read them to this day. I mean, they're just so exciting and inspiring, and, and all this. And that's how she feels about all this other stuff. Now, the problem is, I think video game designers, I can't even imagine what Elder Scrolls 6 is going to look like, right? But I think video game designers are not going to use AI to enhance the gameplay experience. They're going to use it to basically cut out the middleman of your world builders and your script writers. And they'll use AI to just, generate bullshit. Maybe it'll be consistent, maybe it won't. And, just like Hollywood is, part of the reason I think Hollywood relies so much on what's called the unreliable, what is it? The unreliable narrator, right? Basically saying that, well, if there's an inconsistency between one movie to the other, or one TV show to the other, it's not that we fucked up as script writers. It's that, it's the unreliable narrator and blah, blah, blah. And they lean on this crutch. I think they lean on this crutch because they're having AI write their scripts. Okay. But this is going to infect, and that's the word to use. It's going to infect the gaming world as well. So, because everybody's expecting, after Elden Ring and all this stuff, bigger or Elder Ring, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. They're expecting bigger and bigger and bigger games. And, the what's happening in the economics of the gaming industry, it's not possible to constantly hire new people. Microsoft is hoovering up so many studios and then laying thousands of people off. Okay. Even Microsoft can't afford on its own to effectively keep, half the industry afloat as much as it's trying to, right? So this is part of that inflection point. And I'm very worried about AI being used. There's beneficial uses of AI in video games where basically you could use AI with ray tracing and other technologies and upscale the fuck out of like classic games and basically instantly bring every, classic game to a new level of graphical realism, among other things. Okay. And I'm excited for that. Like, that's cool. But using AI to just procedurally generate, world building and all this stuff, I have no interest in that. I want humans writing this shit. I want people who care. I want to feel the passion, right? That's what you used to feel in pre-Disney Star Wars and, pre-2017 Star Trek, was you felt the passion of the writers, that they loved the material and they were excited to do world building. They were excited to put this stuff together. You think of Denise and Michael Okuda, writing all those technical manuals. They love doing that shit. Even though it's all fake. They love doing it. Why? Because they care. Okay. AI doesn't care. And you will be unable to recognize, the passion, because it just doesn't have it. And so, we're going to lose a lot in that. And in some ways, as much as I was saying TIE Fighter is the pinnacle of video games, we might find out Skyrim is really the pinnacle of video games, or something else, because this is this leads into what I want to talk about here for a few minutes. Okay. I'm not going to take too much of your time on this, even though I could talk forever, especially about video games. And some of you, I've gotten the emails and messages from a lot of you, who have just said, like, Brian, just talk about anything and just keep talking. we don't care. We just talk. And that's very sweet of you all to say. But anyway, what we're running into, okay, is, and I think this was the, I don't want to call it the nail in the coffin, but this was one of the real harbingers of this inflection point. And that was the announcement we knew it was coming for a while, but I think it was formally announced in September of 2024, the PlayStation 5 Pro. Okay. Now, the PlayStation 5 has already been around for quite a few years. And now I'm not going to bring up Nintendo. Maybe I'll bring them up a little bit later, because they're an anomaly. They're like Apple, where they exist on they're on a different plane of existence. Okay. Where the rules just don't necessarily seem to apply necessarily. Regardless, we're all waiting with bated breath for the announcement of the Switch 2 for sure. Not that that's terribly hurting them. Okay. Who else can come out with $100 alarm clock? Nintendo and Apple. That's about it. Anyway. But we have the PS5 Pro. So the PlayStation 5's already been out for quite a while. And instead of, starting to leak information, which is what, these, major gaming companies used to do, instead of starting to leak information, okay, about, say the PS6, okay, what actually ends up happening is they, and this isn't new either. Okay. And granted, yes, like, I understand that, the PS5 was, only announced, what was it, in 2019? And finally came out around this time, 4 years ago in 2020, almost to the day, actually. So, a mid-cycle refresh, that's not uncommon. And Sony really set the standard for that. Where, and I mean, yes, Nintendo had done it before as well. I know, and lots of companies had done it before. Okay. But Sony really set the standard where, 3-4 years down the line in a console generation, okay, we'll release a new version of our present console, right? Like, you think of the PS2 Slim. Sometimes they do it very late in the or they do not a mid-cycle refresh, but in an end-cycle refresh, right? Remember the original PlayStation, which had the very small PS1, okay, which was beautiful, just a beautiful little piece of kit, so tiny. You would have that. And of course the PS3, had 3 different models that came out. And it wasn't really until the PS4 that we ended up getting a Pro model, as part of the mid-cycle refresh. Now, granted, the Pro model for the PS4, and this will kind of speak to some things, was a fairly significant improvement over the stock PlayStation 4. Okay, there was a pretty serious difference, and it wasn't just with, PlayStation VR and so on. And the price for the PS4 Pro was $399. Now, was that many years ago? Yeah, I guess it was a few. Okay. Maybe we're getting close to 10 years on when that came out, but regardless, Okay, that was $399. So the PlayStation 5, to have a Pro model, not unheard of, right? Not untested waters by any means. Okay. However, the Pro model is a fairly insignificant, improvement. I mean, they could talk about, oh, well, the GPU is 45% faster or something like that. But we're also reaching the point where like the graphical fidelity of games is, so impressive already on the PS4. Like, what exactly is 45% going to give you? What greater experience are you going to end up getting with the PS5 Pro compared to the stock model? Okay. And that, that raises a big question. Now, the stock model, when that first came out in 2020, was $499. It was $500 US. Okay. The PS5 Pro, however, is $699 US. So $700 basically. Okay. And that's a new high for any console. Now, if you adjust for inflation, do, older consoles and whatever else, would they actually have a value in the thousands and things like this? Or, a release day, a purchase price that would actually be in the thousands? Yeah, sure. Okay. And, certainly there's a conversation to be had around, well, games are still $50 or $60, and they were that, when in the 80s even. And yep, like I hear you on all of these things. Okay. But that's not where this isn't a conversation around inflation. Okay. This isn't even really a conversation around, wow, consoles are getting so expensive. It's not really that. What's really happening here, okay, and this is what I want to get into. And you may have heard other people kind of talk about this, but I really want to get into this because there's a bigger conversation to be had. Okay. What's really happening here is consoles, minus Nintendo, consoles have effectively died as of this point. Okay. Because the actual value, this is what I don't think people understand. All right. And I know because I was there. I've been, like I said earlier, I've been around since very much. I mean, okay, sure. I wasn't around when Computer Wars originally came out, and maybe I wasn't even born when Pong initially released, but I have been, I've been conscious as an older than 3. Okay. I've been conscious since the Atari 2600 was valid. Very valid, in fact. Okay. I was there when the original, when the NES, when the NES was released. I got one on release year, 6 years old. Like, I was there. Okay. I've been there. I know how this goes. The value of a console is actually the fact that it was so much cheaper than a traditional PC, than a traditional computer. Because the games on computers back then blew the fuck away on, basically any game you could imagine on the NES, right? Or, the Sega Master System, or take your pick of the system. Blew them away in scale, in graphical prowess, and so on. Now, there's a conversation certainly to be had as far as, well, what about style and fun factor? Okay, look, this is where Nintendo wins. This is that other level of existence, that other modality that Nintendo's on, because they have the fun and the style in spades that is uniquely theirs, and it's proven and it stood the test of time, and they don't have to worry about shit ever. Okay, yep, can they have failures like the Wii U? Of course they can. Can they ride that out and learn their lesson and innovate again like they did with the Switch? Yes. So it's not, they don't have to sweat that much. Okay. And they're not, I mean, maybe they're doing some layoffs, but they're not feeling the same squeeze by any means that the rest of the video game industry is in the present economy. Because, they put out whatever, I don't know what the latest Mario and Luigi game, and they're going to dominate the charts for at least a week or two, maybe months, and talk about something dominating the charts. I mean, for fuck's sake, they're still selling Mario Kart 8. How the hell can you still sell it? That game is how old? And it still ends up topping the charts. It's always in the top 10. Always. That's insane. So Nintendo doesn't have anything to worry about. Okay. But I would argue everybody else does. Because what happened with the PS5 Pro, and again, PS5 Pro is this supposed kind of mid-cycle refresh, right? And so in 2 or 3 years, even though, yes, the industry, the gaming industry overall is talking about how, well, console generations, which normally lasted 7 years, that time is going to end up being longer. And certainly the Nintendo Switch has been, leaning in on that. Even though we're waiting for an announcement on the Switch 2 before or within or, by March 2025, we're just getting an announcement. It doesn't mean it's coming out. Okay. So, who knows how long, the Switch generation, as it were, is going to last. We can't really say, but we're definitely getting, in that, what did that come out in 2017? We're in 2024. So, we're getting in that 7+ year mark regardless. Okay. Again, Nintendo's the oddity. They don't count here. Regardless, Xbox and Sony, in the PlayStation brand, like they need to be sweating. They really, really need to be sweating, because if the next models, whatever that is for Xbox, and there's another conversation to have around Xbox, particularly as it has to do with Game Pass, but with PlayStation, okay, if the PS5 Pro is $700, that means the PlayStation 6 base model is going to be at least $700, right? Because, the PS6 has to be more powerful than the PlayStation 5 Pro. Otherwise, why upgrade? So it must be at that same level. So what's the problem? Why am I saying they need to sweat? The reason they need to sweat is because at $700, consoles aren't a cheaper alternative to PCs anymore at $700, right? Because now, you can get PCs for, and part of this has to do with, efficiency of processors and, SoCs and all this, because now, you can get computers that can effectively do 4K gaming. All right. Which is that's the big reason to get the PS5 Pro. That's the big reason to do, whatever console upgrade. Okay. You can do that very, very well on an AMD processor with an APU, not even a dedicated GPU. Okay. And, you can play like the latest and greatest AAA games, and you can play them at really high settings. Not super high, not with a crazy refresh rate perhaps, and, and all this, and, different anti-aliasing, and maybe, your ray tracing rate might be on the lower end. Okay. But regardless, you can fucking game on a $600 PC. Easy. Not only that, you can do a lot of gaming, way more gaming than you can do on a console. Even games that are fucking available for free, or to say nothing of emulators that you have access to and all this. Like the things that, Lunar Lake is having its own problems. That's Intel's latest chip. But like, the Ryzen, AMD's Ryzen, the AI 300 series, that thing is smoking, and that's a laptop processor, and it is smoking, on playing games. Like, for fuck's sake, if you're getting a new laptop, get a muck switch on that thing, because you probably won't need, if it comes with a dedicated graphics card, you probably won't need it that much, and you can have a really good time just running off of AMD's integrated graphics. Okay. On battery even, and who knows how long that'll go, because again, processors are getting that much more efficient. Now, I don't want to spend a ton of time saying like, are NPUs actually helping anything? Yeah, at the moment they're not. Are they going to in the future? Maybe. Okay. And that's a big maybe, right? Like the actual applicable argument for NPUs isn't there yet, and maybe gaming is going to be the thing that takes advantage of it. But then that also speaks to the point, is that PCs can do so much more than any console can. It's not even an argument. Okay. So, if you can spend less than the price of a PS5 Pro and get even just a gaming laptop, who knows what you could do with a desktop build, but you could get a gaming laptop for less than that. And the amount of, gaming history and gaming today and gaming future and graphical ability that you will have with that, like, consoles are dead. I mean, they're not going to die. I know they're not going to die, but you get my point, is that they're effectively dead. The arguments for their existence are no longer valid. Everybody might as well join the PC master race now. And I applaud that term. Always have. Everybody should. Unless you're just, and I don't say just as a pejorative, unless, you're just a Nintendo guy, like, hey, that, talk about being valid, that is valid as fuck. Okay, because there is nothing like Nintendo, baby. Yeah, I mean, if you're just a Nintendo guy, then, none of this matters to you anyway. Who, like, Sony, who? Microsoft, who? What the fuck are you talking about, right? And I completely applaud, that position. I mean, I'm like 90% that anyway. Okay. So, like that's the thing is, again, outside of Nintendo, like, consoles are effectively dead. And to add on to the point, I mean, Microsoft, and you can already read this in their own interviews and documentation from their own team, where their the leadership team for Xbox is basically saying, like, yeah, no, we're going all in cloud gaming. We're putting our games on every platform. We want to be more of a brand, not a console. And I think they know they need to do that. I mean, and it's ironic too, because like the first Xbox, wonderful goddamn machine, the OG Xbox was basically just a small computer. I mean, right down to did it even have a SATA drive? I think it was just an IDE drive at the time. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, right down to the IDE drive. Like, it really was just a small computer. Now, granted, Sony has been trying to brand its, or bill, I want to say, not brand, but bill its PlayStation consoles, at least since the PS3, themselves as computers. Okay. And you can make an argument they've been doing this since, PS1, but regardless, they've been, like billing their consoles as that, to the point that the PS3 at one point, before they got rid of the other OS feature, you could put Linux on it and it ran pretty damn well. I know, because I did it. So I know Sony was going in that direction at one point. Clearly, they thought that was not viable, probably because of the PS3 wasn't a failure, but it also wasn't like a PS2 level success. Will anything be a PS2 level success? Well, I guess the Switch would be, but otherwise, yeah, likely not. Like, the PS2 was an oddity, and really it's because the PS2 was more than a gaming machine. It was also a DVD player, and it was the cheapest DVD player at the time. And cheapest also because it was also a video game console. So, like, for the family budget, in the early aughts, like, that made a ton of sense. Oh, the kids can play video games and we can watch DVDs. Let's buy it, because it's something for everybody. Okay. That's no longer true with these systems, because at the same time, but this, the Xbox can do 4K discs, and most people don't care about 4K discs. Hell, I am a physical movie disc aficionado. I'm not a dilettante. I'm a fucking aficionado. And I don't give a rat's ass about, Ultra HD 4K. I don't care. And if I don't care, like, you can guarantee there's a lot of people who don't care. I mean, how many movies, like even new movies, okay, will come out. Yeah, they'll come out on streaming. But then how are they released, for quote unquote home video, otherwise physical media? They'll just come out on DVD. I mean, I can think of new movies that I've gotten that the only way they're available is on DVD. They did not bother with the Blu-ray. They did not bother with whatever else. Hounds of War, MK Ultra. I mean, those are just a couple of movies that straight to DVD. And I can't even imagine, like, wait, really? Why not put out the Blu-ray? But they don't. These are new films. So anyway, I'm just saying, people don't care about all of that. So you're not going to reach that PS2 level of success. Again, you just can't. unless you're Nintendo, which again, they're the anomaly in all of this. So, okay, I said I only wanted to take a few minutes of your time, but this is kind of the point that we're at, is again, the argument, the reason that consoles did money for, since the 80s was because they were sold as a cheaper computer alternative. And I mean, many of these things were sold as more than just, video game systems as well. But that ended up becoming, the main thing that that's the software that's sold, right? So that's what shipped. But that time's passed. Again, if you, and look, even Sony knows this, right? I mean, how many games are they, releasing on PC? Hell, they're even releasing them on the Switch now, right? Like, what was that game, Stray, where you're the cat? Really, really, really cool game. That was a PS5, I guess, or maybe it was PS4, but that was a PlayStation, let's just say that. That was a PlayStation exclusive for a year? And then it ended up on PC. And then this month, it's actually coming out on Switch. Unheard of. But Sony knows the writing's on the wall. Like, consoles are dead. It all comes down to the software, because, the expense of creating consoles that can handle that can actually be more advanced than the previous generation gets them into computer territory, into PC territory. So why bother? Like, why bother doing consoles anymore? I don't even know if we've heard anything about a PS6, at any point. And so who knows? Maybe the PS5 Pro, that might be the end of the road. Now, I mean, with Xbox is apparently, according to Phil Spencer, who's head of Xbox, they're apparently kind of exploring the idea of doing a handheld similar to Nintendo. But look, they're not going to do the fucking money. And I don't even think that makes sense, because you have Game Pass, which can be played on anything with a goddamn screen. And so everybody already has a handheld Xbox, ultimately. I mean, yes, there's some games that haven't, really crossed over yet, but that's where we're at. Now, I do want to spend just a few more minutes, okay, talking about another aspect of this. And that is, again, the gaming industry overall is in tough economic times. Part of that comes down to, of course, like the greater expense of consoles. So consoles aren't selling the same way. So many people are concentrating. I mean, and look, like, mobile games that have IAP, in-app purchases and everything else, like the amount of money those do compared to, your Elden Rings and whatever else is, I mean, they are night and fucking day. Like, it's insane how much more money they do compared to your big AAA games. So, a lot of these dev houses, they're going to go where the money is. And they're looking at that. But you still have people who have been around maybe forever, like me, or feels like I've been around forever, okay, who want to play, their AAA games or whatever. And I think what we're seeing, here's another anomaly, okay, that I think is important to bring up. And that is a game like, and this isn't the only one, but a game like Age of Empires 2. Age of Empires 2, the definitive edition, is celebrating its 5th year. Okay, but Age of Empires 2 overall, not the definitive edition, but the game originally, that game's over 25 years old now. I mean, that game's ancient. But people still play it in droves. They don't just still play it in droves. Microsoft has, which, is the studio that has always made the Age of Empires franchise. Microsoft has found it worthy to come out with massive DLC packs. Really, they're full-on old school expansion packs for this particular game, for Age of Empires 2. And it is this one in particular because, it's not just an Age of Empires thing, right? Like, I mean, maybe Age of Empires 4 is doing okay and there's some DLC coming out for that, but like Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition, which is a re-release also of a much older game, came out a couple of years ago. It's not getting anywhere near the amount of DLC that Age of Empires 2 is. Okay. Now we also had Age of Mythology Retold, which is a re-release of Age of Mythology, another killer, real-time strategy game. from the Age series. That just came out. We'll end up seeing what numbers that does. But this is the thing, and because it's not just about remastering, right? Like, this isn't just about, oh, remaster game, put it out there, okay, and that was easy money or something like that. No, there is what can only be called LTS, long time support, happening for these games. Like, this is crazy. You should see the size of, what was it, Chronicles, Ancient Greece, I think is the expansion that just came out for Age of Empires 2. Like, these are whole other games built into another game, and that you only spend, what, $15 for? You know, because it's treated as a DLC. But I mean, like, Microsoft is doing this so right. Like, because again, these are full on old school expansion packs, just like, you know, with StarCraft, where it had Brood War, or you think of, you know, like Warcraft 2, which also, by the way, just got a massive remastering. Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2, and Warcraft 3 Reforged got a 2.0 update. I mean, this is the thing, is I think Microsoft is realizing, and good for them, they are realizing that, you know, again, the console business doesn't really matter. All that matters is the screen in front of you. And also, they recognize they have these just huge install bases of these games that have been around forever. And why ignore them? Just keep putting out expansion packs for these games and people will buy. And it avoids the price creep of video games, of, you know, should games cost more than $59.99 because you're just selling an expansion pack and so on. Like, this is what's happening, because the cost to develop a new AAA game is astronomical, to the tune of, you know, 3 to 4 or 5 times the price of what it costs to make a Hollywood blockbuster, which is crazy to consider, but that's the reality. And so why make a new game when you already have people and you know the metrics of how many people are playing, you know, an old game, and just keep putting out updates for that? So not only are consoles dying, but in some sense, this is more of that inflection point. In some sense, we've reached a point where, you know, games like have become immortal, in the sense that, or should I say, older games have become immortal and new games are completely slowing down. You know, as to where we might not get new consoles. Hell, we might not get new games. I mean, that's, of course, that's being hyperbolic, right? There's always going to be new games that come out. But the bulk of, you know, of development hours, and where, you know, the workforce is, you know, and what I mean by development now is, you know, the manpower, whatever, you know, where money is flowing as far as game development goes, could actually be going forward. There's a chance that more than half of that, maybe even 75% of dev hours, could end up being on just DLC for games that have been around forever in the future. Why? Because that's just so much cheaper to do, and you can still make bank when it's a truly time-tested great game. For example, Age of Empires 2. This is a very weird time we're entering. Okay. And, you know, we often want to, we're going to close up on this. Okay. Because we often want to fall back on, well, that's not how things were done when I was younger. But keep in mind that the video game industry is barely 40 years old. Barely. 45, 50, maybe, depending upon what you want to count, what you want to consider to be like the industry. I mean, sure, video games have been around since the 70s, arguably, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. Okay. But it wasn't an industry, I would say, you know, until you hit like the late 70s or like 1980. And then, of course, you had the video game crash, and then Nintendo comes in and saves the day. You know, that's a very short period of time. Okay. We still have so many people alive today who existed before video games were even a thing. Okay. So it's not even a lifetime's worth old, right? This entire industry. And so what's normal? We don't know. Nobody fucking knows what's normal. It's like, you know, I used to bring up this example all the time. It's like people who complain about like, oh, why do you want me to use reusable bags? Like, I'm used to having plastic bags. Or the same people, before that would argue, why am I getting plastic bags? I want paper bags. I need brown paper bags and blah, 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 and whatever. And it's like, and they talk about it as if, no, this is how it should be. When it's like, fuck, man, the grocery stores barely existed for 100 years. What do you talk? What the hell is normal inside of 100 years? Nothing. So, yes, we can say, wow, this is very different than when I was a kid. But at the same time, as far as what is normal, what should the video game industry look like in the long term? Is there even supposed to be some kind of like standardized long term of what the video game industry is supposed to look like? Maybe it's something, because it is the highest form of art, maybe it's something that is just constantly disruptive because of its ability to be applied and developed and used in so many different ways. That there is no standard in video games. Hey, as much as the next guy, I wish, believe me, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I wish video games were still installed using local media, or that it was a cartridge or a disc that you popped in and that was the whole game on there. There was no 100 gigabyte update day one, okay, that you needed to install to play it or whatever. And that cartridge could last you for decades. As long as you kept it in good condition, it could go until the end of fucking time, and you could plug it in, and as long as you had the right adapter to your television, and you could play the same game you played in 1987 as you would in 2027. Is that how I think things should work? Sure. That's how I think that they should work. That's how I want things to work. But there's no guarantee that that's how it's, or, there's should and supposed, and there's no supposed. The industry is barely 50 years old. But we get confused because we get this sense, and this is true for the tech world overall, because we've seen, let's just say in the past 40 years, we've seen so many dramatic changes in computational power, graphical ability, fidelity, and so on, all these things, and different devices and device classes and whatever. We've gone through so many changes in the last 40 years that it feels like it's been centuries. But remember, it's only been like 40 years. And that's nothing. That's not even enough time for a person to mature. Believe me, I know so many people my age who, frankly, they're still in high school in their head. They haven't grown up for shit. And I think that's true for most people. So, this is where we're at. Consoles going the way of the dodo. But then, if there is a suppose, maybe that's how it was always supposed to be. Because, like I said earlier, the only thing computers are really good for, and what we really need them for, if you feel like video games are a need, are video games themselves. And so, at the end of the day, maybe it was all supposed to go to PCs. Something to think about, and I will see all of you, on the other side.